Welcome to part 3 of our series. I'm going to go ahead and share our PowerPoint, and we will get started. All right, everyone, this is part 3 on our series in yoga, mindfulness, and body-based interventions. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the polyvagal theory and a little bit more about how the nervous system fits into all of this discussion on why body-based interventions are so important. So before we begin, we're going to do a progressive muscle relaxation. So we're starting to look at each section with one of the activities that could be useful for us as we're exploring the idea of body-based interventions. So you can do this sitting or lying down. You could even do this standing if you'd like, but I would suggest sitting or lying down. And if it's comfortable for you, you can close your eyes. If it feels better to keep your eyes open, that's also absolutely okay. So we're going to start with one nice deep breath in and one long exhale out. And then begin to notice how the muscles in your body feel. So we're going to start by simply making a fist with our right hand and make that fist as tight as you can. And then release, open up your hand. 2 more times, really tighten up your right fist. And then relax. 1 more time, make a nice tight fist, feel the muscles contract, and then release. Let your hand be open and relaxed. And then we're going to tense our entire right arm. So you're going to make a little fist, but you're also going to engage your biceps, your triceps as much as you can. And then again, release. 2 more times, engage your entire right arm. It might look like the people in the picture. And soften and release. 1 more time, engage your entire right arm, even your right shoulder, your fist. And then release and bring your arm down if it's lifted up. Other side, and you can do this with your hand resting right in your lap. We're going to just make a tight fist with our left hand. Notice the tightness in your fist and release that tightness. Once again, nice tight fist. Release. Notice the difference between your tight fist, using those muscles, engaging everything, and then soften and release. And then your entire left arm, your bicep, your tricep, your lower arm, your shoulder, engage, and then soften. Once again, engage and soften. And engage and soften. Release your hand down if it's lifted up. Bring your awareness to your face. Make a little tight face, scrunch it up. And then release your facial muscles. Once again, tighten and release. 1 more time, tighten and release. Bring your awareness to your shoulders. Scrunch your shoulders up by your ears. Make tight little muscles there. Soften and release. Again. And release. And 1 more time, tighten and soften. Bring your awareness to your belly and your back. Tighten your stomach, your spinal muscles, everything around your back body, and soften. Once again, tighten and release. And 1 more time, and release. We're going to explore both legs together. So whatever position your legs are in, maybe your feet are on the floor, tighten your glutes, your thighs, your toes into little fists, and soften. Tighten everything in your lower body and release. One more time, tighten and soften. And then we're going to do our whole body all together. All the muscles that you can explore, your face, your shoulders, your arms. Tighten, scrunch everything up. Soften and release. 2 more times. Everything gets tight. Everything's engaged. And release. And last time. And release. Take a moment and notice how your body feels after you've moved through that exercise. Take a couple of breaths. All right, we're going to move into some more discussion, starting with our nervous system and why we're using body-based interventions. So whether you are a yoga teacher who's just looking at this topic overall for better knowledge, or you're a social worker or therapist looking at some different interventions, this is really useful to know. So first of all, this is a bottom-up approach to treatment. This means we're working with the bottom as well as the base of the brainstem, which is where trauma lives, to work with that part of our body instead of our cognitive part, which is at the very, very top. So our nervous system's general reaction to any kind of trauma is terror. And that means that the sympathetic nervous system is going to take over, and we're going to get everything into your system that it needs to survive in the moment. So that's going to be your heart rate going up, your breath going faster so that we can get that oxygen into your limbs. We have adrenaline and cortisol going into your bloodstream. We have sugar coming in, everything to get you ready to fight or to run away, whatever your brainstem thinks that you can most likely survive. It's important to know that this is a system that works more in the base of your brain and in the right lower hemisphere. This is more the amygdala area, the fear center. That's what's going to be more online during this part of the process. When we're looking at bottom-up processing, we're not using our thinking part of our brain because that's not what was working when we were in that trauma response situation. When we're in that trauma response, we don't get all the way up to the thinking part of our brain, that frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the stuff that like makes logical sense out of things. We're not getting to that part of the brain when we're getting ready to deal with trauma or a possible life-threatening situation. So this is sometimes what we call high and low roads. Low roads is that trauma response of what do we need right now? So that's the thalamus talking to the amygdala, that right lower part, to say, this is what we need to survive right now. Sometimes we call this the reptilian brain. So this is also where trauma is going to be living because this is what's stimulated in that trauma response situation. It's going to be the amygdala. And that's where we're creating these mental models of safety in our brain that says, this is what you're going to have to do. So this is also related to our sympathetic nervous system. The high road is what we do when we make conscious decisions. So that's when we're going up into the neural cortex. That's when we're making a conscious decision to say, I think that the better thing for me to do is this or that or whatever it might be. This takes more time. And that's why in a trauma situation, we don't get the time to go up into the neural cortex. We're going to the brainstem, the amygdala, because that takes less time. And that couple of seconds might be what helps us to survive that situation. So this is something that's really important for clients to know, that they did not get to choose consciously using their thinking part of the brain what they did when they were in that life or death situation. So a lot of clients have a lot of shame. They think I should have done this. I should have run. I should have fought harder, whatever that might be. But they did not get to make that conscious decision. That is really important for people to understand. This is just one more picture that kind of shows that we're storing trauma differently in our bodies. So usually when we're talking about a normal day-to-day memory, we're talking about what we did yesterday. We can explain that very well in words. We remember trauma less in words and more in the feelings and sensations in our body because it's being stored in that amygdala, that trauma and fear response. When we're using our frontal lobe, that's what's storing our normal memories. That's easy to access and put into logical order. But when we are overwhelmed and we're in that terror situation, we're not in the frontal lobe. We're in the limbic system and especially the amygdala and the brainstem. So this is where it's also just kind of another example, another visual to show that this is how our brain is working in either our trauma, immediate survival situations and in our long-term stress situations. One idea that some people, I'm noticing, I'm here in India right now, and a lot of people haven't heard about this, even though I think it's fairly well known in the United States. So we have the Adverse Childhood Consequences Study that was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in 1995 to 1997. This is one of the largest studies that was looking at childhood abuse and neglect, as well as other household challenges, and connecting that to later life health and well-being. That's both physical and mental health and well-being. So this initial study looked at how traumatic childhood events may have negatively affected adult health. There were 17,000 participants, so this was a very large study. And they were asked about their experiences with childhood maltreatment, family dysfunction, that could be a family member who's been in prison or an adult in the family that has mental illness, as well as current health status and behaviors. So we're looking at risky behaviors in these adults, but we're also looking at what happens even when people don't have those risky behaviors, but they had these adverse childhood consequences. Ooh, adverse childhood experiences. We're gonna have to go back and change that slide. Adverse childhood experiences. So this study found that the more people had negative experiences as a child, the worse the long-term physical and mental health was for that person. And that's even taking away those risky behaviors, any kind of substance use or other activities that that adult might have been engaged with. So what we know now is that these traumatic experiences in childhood can actually lead to the vagus nerve not really properly working. And this is particularly challenging when a child has grown up with the vagus nerve not properly working, because we're stuck too much in that sympathetic nervous system. And this is where the vagus nerve becomes highly important. So the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. So the 10th nerve coming out from our cranium, our back of our spine, back of our head. There's two branches for this. There's the dorsal or the back body, and that's the nerve that's going to be more in charge of the freeze response. This is more primitive. The ventral or front body is more connected to the social aspect. So that's going to be looking at and controlling facial muscles, tone of voice, and things like this. Our vagus nerve moves down through our brain stems, through our tongue, our vocal cords, our hearts, lungs, digestive system, and lots of others. We're going to see that in the next slide. If we are in a high stress or traumatic response situation, all of these organs are going to be impacted. And this is where these health issues that we saw in the ACEs study can take place. When we have a healthy vagus nerve, we're able to have our body return to a balanced state more easily after stress or trauma. This is related to heart variability, which we're going to look at the very end. But we don't want to completely take away that sympathetic response because we need it. We also want to be able to move into the parasympathetic when we can, because that's what's going to take care of our long-term health. So here's just a quick picture about the vagus nerve, a couple of pictures. I think these both show in different ways how many parts of our body are connected to the vagus nerve. So we see everything from the eyes, the vocal cords, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines, the kidney, even the reproductive organs are connected to our vagus nerve. And this is why we need our parasympathetic system to be working so that these organs can all be working properly. So a little bit more about polyvagal theory. This was developed by a gentleman named Stephen Porges. We understand constriction, and that's both avoidance and association, as a function of the social engagement system. So we talked about how the vagus nerve is the ventral vagus nerve, that's the one in the front, is connected to the muscles in the face. And this shows us the state of the animal's sensations and feelings. So this is the part that when we look at a person, we can see by the expression on their face if we think that they're a threat. Or we can see by the hear by the tone of their voice, it sounds like this person is angry and intends to do me harm. Similarly, it could go the other way. We can look at a person, see a smile on the face, we mirror that smile, we know that they're probably a safe person. This is part of what helps us communicate well with other people. It helps us regulate our social gestures. The dorsal vagal system is in the back. That connects more to the stomach and gut and is more associated with freezing and association. So that's kind of like when that running away doesn't work, we go into freezing, folding, and shutting down. The problem comes not from having their sympathetic response, but the problem comes when the energy that was meant to help us survive gets stuck, or when it's so repetitious that we don't get out of the sympathetic nervous system and back into our parasympathetic. So animals will actually have ways to get this out of their body. Humans are taught not to do that. So if you see an animal in the wild that is chased by a predator, but somehow they get away, you'll see them kind of shake and they get all that extra energy out. We are taught that we're not supposed to have responses. So we instead keep it all inside. So we have physical and emotional pain that gets stuck in the body. We're not able to return to a normal homeostasis level between our two parts of our nervous system. So we're trying to create these different body-based interventions and these different interventions that are focused on the vagus nerve to help us get out of that sympathetic response to basically find out how we can come back to a normal state and create room for the body and the mind to heal. So this chart kind of shows these differences. So it gets very confusing because sometimes we say sympathetic is all trauma response, stress response, parasympathetic is all relaxation, but it gets a little bit more complicated than that. So what we actually see is at the bottom of this chart in the green area, this is our healthy parasympathetic nervous system when we're in the ventral vagus area and we're doing all of those good long-term rest and digest things. So we're curious, we're grounded, we're mindful, our body systems are working to help us have strong immunity to be able to rest. Circulation is going to all of our non-vital organs. All of these things are happening. When we go into an arousal situation where we see danger coming, that's when we switch into the sympathetic system. And that's when we start to see that hyperarousal, where our blood pressure, heart rate, adrenaline, everything like that is going up. And all of those longer term things like digestion and immune, it shuts off, it goes down for the time being. So in this sympathetic, we're in fight or flight. We're like getting ready to do something. We're going to fight or we're going to run away. Great. Okay. Maybe we're in a situation where we can't do either of those things. Then we go into the dorsal vagal, that life threat hypoarousal. And that's where we start to see issues around dissociation, shutting down, being hopeless, being trapped. If we're looking at our animals in the wild situation, that's where we see the deer folding and freezing, and it literally cuts off the physical sensations to the body so that it does not feel pain with whatever is coming next. And then if it survives somehow, it gets up, it shakes all of that out, it returns to homeostasis. If we're in our dorsal vagal parasympathetic system, then we are really having those endorphins that are going to numb and raise the pain threshold so that we are not feeling what's happening. This is where we think a lot about dissociation. And in this, we have heart rate decreasing, blood pressure decreasing, temperature decreasing, our breath is decreasing. All of these responses are happening at the same time. So we see that we're going up from normal levels to fight or flight. That's not going to work. Now we're going to freeze and fold. And then the opposite happens on the way back down. So we've survived. We're now going into deactivation. We're going back into our sympathetic. Maybe we get stuck there. And then if we can, we hope to get back to that parasympathetic ventral vagal complex. So I know that's a little more confusing, a little more complicated than we often explain this, but I hope that's helpful. And this is where we talk about heart rate variability. So I'm going to switch slides. Heart rate variability means that you can move in between those different states because we want to be able to get to the sympathetic when our body needs to. That's a good thing. We want to be prepared for when we're driving down the highway and the car starts coming at us. We want our system to be prepared to make us do that quick response to help us stay safe or whatever the threat might be. We also want to be able to calm our bodies down when that's done so we can get back into that long-term healthy state. This is the idea of heart rate variability. So when we're able to quickly move in between those two states, that's a healthy range of heart rate variability. That means that you can react to stimuli and then go back to homeostasis. What we don't see with healthy heart rate variability is that quick response. With unhealthy heart rate variability, something comes up, your heart rate goes way up and it stays up there. So you have trouble slowing things back down. So we're really, really looking at how important it is to be able to move back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic because we need both of those things online and working well for our body to function. So as we're talking about all of this, how do we increase vagal tone? How do we have a healthy vagus nerve? This is going to be a very similar list to all of our other body-based interventions that we've talked about. So we can improve our vagal tone through breath work. We can look at yoga or any mindfulness-based exercise. This can be Tai Chi, mindful weightlifting, whatever it is, as long as it's slow and intentional and we can have that mindfulness taking place during that activity. Any kind of singing or chanting is actually very helpful because it's massaging the vocal cords that, especially when we're singing or chanting, it's sustained and our tone changes. It fluctuates more than just normal talking. So even though socializing and laughing is down at the bottom, that's related to that ventral vagus nerve. Singing and chanting, that range that we use in that particular state actually gives a little bit more of a massage. Meditation can be great, but I do caution people with meditation because that can be triggering. We're going to talk about that in part 5 of this series. A cold exposure can help balance the nervous system. So we may have seen some stuff on social media about people doing ice water baths. This is something that shock to our system brings us back to awareness of the present moment. And the key is when you have that exposure to try to relax into it instead of fighting it. So If you want to try an ice bath, great. I've done them, they're great. If you get in there and you tensile your muscles up, that's going to make it harder. Get into that cold and then release and soften and breathe. Remember, breathing is key. A short version of that, if you just need to quickly get yourself into a different state, is to grab an ice cube, hold onto that ice cube, and feel the sensation of the coldness in your hand. That is one thing that is used a lot in DBT. You can do a massage or a self-massage. And then also nutrition can be important in this. So our gut brain impacts our mental state. When our gut is healthy, it can send better feedback to the vagus nerve to increase the vagal tone as well. So that is just a few thoughts on the importance of the vagus nerve and how involved our sympathetic system is with all of this stuff, and a few ideas of how to get us back into a little bit better homeostasis where we're using the parasympathetic system and the vagus nerve in a healthier manner. All right, thank you for joining us for this section of the series. Our next part will be looking at yoga-based interventions.